Are you ready, Sharon? Okay, we're back here on the record in file 19 CF 916. The appearances are the same, and the defendant is here as well. Talk about a number of things that I spoke about before lunch. First thing is the exhibits. I will sign this order, and I'll read the order as hereby ordered that one, no one other than the parties may access, copy, record, or manipulate any exhibits marked at trial, in this case during the pendency of this trial period. Two, to ensure the integrity of this trial, no person or entity shall record or distribute any of the private conversations or communications taking place at counsel tables during the pendency of the trial. If any of the private conversations are captured, they shall be taken down or electronically modified so as to ensure the contents of any conversation at counsel table remain private. So I will sign this order, and I would also like to expand on what the district attorney said this morning, and perhaps Mr. DeAngelo as well. The exhibits that the media photographed were those only published to the jury. So those were the approximately 7 pictures that the jury saw that were published to the jury. The media then took pictures of the photographs that we had, so they were published to the jury. And after they're published, I mean, you could be sitting in the courtroom and see what's being published as well. I believe in public access, and any published photos were distributed. And I did receive the permission of defense counsel and of the state before allowing the published pictures to be photographed. With regard to the purse, if I recall correctly, was not published. However, the jury stand is right next to me. The state showed the jury what the purse was, in the contents of the purse as well, and the media did take pictures of the purse. With regard to the cell phone, the flip phone, that was photographed as well. That, again, is all public knowledge. It was displayed in this public, I can't stress that word enough, public trial, and everybody saw it. And media certainly could have zoomed in with their camera and taken a picture or taken a picture after. It was never removed from the evidence bag. And frankly, all this was done with the staff, but the 2 police officers were here, the state was here, the defense was here, people were in and out, milling about. So it's really, I think, disingenuous to say that somehow the integrity of the trial was challenged. It is not. And I just want to put that on the record. With regard to the second issue, and that has to do with the Miranda Goodchild hearing. And earlier, Mr. DeAngelo, I did speak to you about whether in Miranda Goodchild issues, and you said there were not, and so I entered an order. But I want to address Mr. Pro-Koe-Povitch at this time as well. Good afternoon. And you, in terms of what the bench book says, in terms of Goodchild is voluntariness, it says the ultimate question is whether the confession or statement was voluntary product, free of unconstrained will, reflecting the deliberateness of choice and not coerced, or product of improper police pressure. So that's the Goodchild portion. The Miranda portion, I think we've all heard the Miranda rights ad nauseum on television, on police shows. But one thing with the Miranda rights, defendant has to be in custody, defendant has to be interrogated. And then the officer, I did receive the Miranda rights. They are here as well. I guess I won't read them. But if you think Mr. Prokopovitch, that that your statements, or if there are any statements, I don't even know if there are any, were not voluntary, or there's a Miranda violation, you're entitled to a hearing outside the presence of the jury. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
And in both of those matters, the state has the burden of proof. Do you understand that?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
So are you waiving any right to have a Miranda/good child hearing?
The only question I have is, I don't remember the first couple interviews that I had with the officers, if they read my Miranda rights to me or not. They may have. I'm not saying they didn't, and I'm not saying they did, but I'll waive my rights.
You wish to talk to Mr. DeAngelo further about that issue? All right. Mr. Prokopovitch, anything, what would you like to say?
I understand it now. My attorney explained it to me. I'll waive rights or whatever.
All right, and you're waiving the rights both of the good child hearing and of the Miranda hearing. It would be two separate hearings.
Yes, sir.
And you are waiving the rights?
Yes, I'm waiving my rights.
Has anyone made any promises or threats to you to waive these rights?
No.
Have you had enough time to think about and talk to your counsel about your decision?
Yes, Your Honor.
Mr. DeAngelo, do you wish to add anything?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
And Mr. DeAngelo, you would keep with your original statement you made at the pretrial that there's no challenge on Miranda or good child. Is that correct?
That is correct, Your Honor.
And I did sign the order as well on the exhibits. And the last thing is about the witnesses or witness that Ms. Lemko brought up. And Mr. DeAngelo, you heard Ms. Lemko earlier, is that right?
Yes, Your Honor. In regards to the witness, Mr. Jones, I did speak to my client just before the lunch break and indicated whether or not he would agree to have Mr. Jones appear by Zoom. He indicated that he would agree to have Mr. Jones, since he's the only one that's appearing by Zoom, to keep the trial moving forward, that he would appear by Zoom. So I'll have him put that on the record as well.
Mr. Pro-Koe-Povitch, you agree with what your counsel has just said?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
And do you understand that the witness, what is his name again, Ms. Lemko? Richard Jones would appear by Zoom over the computer, instead of being here in person.
Yes, sir.
And if you press the issue, I'm not making a decision, but you could argue that he should be here in person, or otherwise he would be should be excluded. Do you understand that?
Yes, sir.
And you're willing to give that up?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And I should say that typically all witnesses are required to be here in the courtroom. However, we are in a COVID pandemic, and I understand that the gentleman does not want to travel because of that. I certainly don't blame him. I mean, that's, could be a tough thing depending on circumstances. Okay, so Ms. Lemko, when you are going to call him, if you get that set up, that would be great.
Thank you, Your Honor. And as I indicated off the record, we plan on calling him after the afternoon break, so we have an opportunity to set up the Zoom link.
Thank you. Is there anything else that we should be put on the record before the jury comes out?
No, when the jury comes out, though, off the record, we also had a discussion about moving into evidence the other exhibits. We will take care of that.
All right, let's stand for the jury then. Thank you. Okay, have a seat, everybody, and the record should reflect that the jury has now returned. And Ms. Lemko, do you have a motion to move two items into evidence?
Yes, Your Honor. This time, the state would move for the admission. We previously had offered exhibit number 31, which was the missing person flyer. We moved for the admission of that. We previously also marked exhibit 46, which was the cane of Victoria Prokopovitz. We believe those are the only other two outstanding ones.
Thank you. Mr. DeAngelo, anything you'd like to say on those two exhibits?
No objection to either exhibit, Your Honor.
Then I will receive both of those exhibits. Thank you very much. And Ms. Lemko, your next witness, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. At this time, the state would call Officer Scott Schermitzler to the stand.
If you'd come up here, please, and have a seat right here, the clerk will swear you in.
Will you please remain standing and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you God. Will you please state your name for the record and spell both your first and last name for the court?
Sure, it's Scott, S-C-O-T-T, Schermitzler, S-C-H-E-R-M-I-T-Z-L-E-R.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Officer Schmitzler, how are you employed?
How am I employed? Right now, I'm employed at United Ground Express.
Okay. Previous to that, did you have employment in law enforcement?
Yes, ma'am.
Where was that?
At Schwaben Public Safety.
And how long were you employed with the Ashwaubenon Public Safety?
Over 26 years.
And what were your positions while you were working there?
I was a public safety officer, paramedic, firefighter, a lieutenant. For a period, I was detective.
A myriad of roles there?
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm sorry, how many years were you there?
Over 26.
in your role as a law enforcement officer with the Ashwaubenon Department of Public Safety, did you have training and experience with respect to investigating criminal instances of conduct?
Yes, ma'am.
And on occasion, did you assist in investigations involving missing persons or homicides?
Yes.
With respect to those roles, do you have training and experience with respect to taking items of evidence into custody,
I do.
as well as conducting searches?
Yes.
Now, did you also, you just listed a myriad of roles that you had there. Were you also someone who is certified as part of the Brown County Dive Unit?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and can you explain for the jury, what is the Brown County Dive Unit?
The Brown County Dive Unit was put together in approximately 2005 by Homeland Security to protect international ports. It was originally put out as a regional dive team, and we were trained by Homeland Security Navy divers in order to check for lipid bombs on any ships for international ports, which is Green Bay. It was an international port at the time. So, since 2005, you know, there's only so much we can do with the Port of Green Bay. So we kind of morphed into a search and recovery team as well, recovering evidence, bodies, etc.
And how long were you a member of that dive team?
Since 2005.
Till to date?
Till April of 2019.
Okay, is that when you retired from the Ashwaubenon Department of Public Safety?
That's when I no longer was employed at Ashwaubenon Public Safety, correct?
Okay, so were you on that dive team, if my math is correct, approximately 14 years?
Yeah, that would be right.
Okay. Now, when you're a member of a dive team such as that, with respect to your role there, what were the qualifications that you need for your training with that?
Well, originally, you know, when they wanted to pick the divers for this specific team as regional Homeland Security type stuff, so they went off the SWAT team. They were looking for members from the SWAT team of Brown County, so I happened to be on that, and then they put us through the training we needed to become public safety divers, emergency rescue divers, advanced divers, open water divers, basically a whole plethora of different certifications, up to and including, for me, dive master and assistant instructor.
With respect to your role then on a dive team, all of the people on the Brown County Dive Unit, have they all been certified?
Yes, ma'am.
And besides whatever certification you get initially, is that something that you also follow up with annual trainings to sustain that certification?
Correct. We were constantly training. Yes.
Now, with regard to your role on that Brown County Dive Team, and how many people are on that?
Well, typically it was anywhere from about 6 to 9.
Okay. And so when you go out, how many people go out when you would have a search? Does it just depend what kind of search it is?
It depends what kind of search it is, but anybody that's available when we have a limited size team would generally go if we had a significant search objective. And
with respect to it being a Brown County area dive team, are there members from various agencies that are all a part of it? Is it multi-jurisdictional?
Well, with me being on there, it was, yes. Most of the people were from the Sheriff's Department, but I was from Ashwaubenon.
And that's the Brown County Sheriff's Department?
Correct.
All right. Now, specifically, I'd like to direct your attention to April and May of 2013. Were you working as part of the Brown County Dive Team around that time?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, at some point, were you called in to assist on the Brown County Dive Team in an investigation involving a missing person by the name of Victoria Prokopovitz?
Yes.
And what was your role? What were you asked to assist with?
At the time, we were asked to assist with a search on the McKeefrey Quarry, on Quarry Road in the Pulaski area.
And that area on, would that be 6260 Quarry Drive?
I don't have it in front of me, but that sounds correct.
But it's the McKeefrey Quarry?
It is, yes.
And when you're saying McKeefrey, is that affiliated with McKeefrey and Sons?
Yes, I believe so.
Okay. You just know what it's called?
Yes.
Okay. With regard to that, specifically, I'd like to direct your attention to May 6th of 2013. Was that one of the first, strike that, May 5th, 2013, was that one of the first dives you did?
Yes, it would have been that first week of May, yes.
Okay, and so it's May 5th, 2013. You recall what time of day you would have responded there?
I think it was mid-morning. It was probably afternoon before we actually started diving.
Okay, and what do you do?
What do I do?
What does your Brown County Dive Unit do with respect to the search on that day?
Sure. Well, this investigation was headed by Investigator Romenstein. So we took his information and basically looked at the area and thought, what is our best potential in locating the target, which could have been at that point suicide, homicide. We didn't know what we were looking for at all, other than a potential body in the water. And we just looked at accessibility and just general layout of the area and figured what would be the best area to search for this person.
And so as a result of that, and I guess in law enforcement terms, that's the operational plan or op plan that you had for that day?
Correct.
And is that typical in law enforcement, that before you do searches or engage in your duties, that you sit down collectively and decide what you need to do?
That's correct.
Okay. And so on this date of May 5th of 2013, and do you recall, was there some other agencies there that were also conducting search with cadavers and other law enforcement agencies?
Yeah, I'm not sure on every group that was there, but I know that the DNR was there with some sort of remote, like underwater rove unit, radio operated vehicle that could search and take pictures, that sort of thing. Also, there was a gentleman from Sturgeon Bay dive team by the name of Clint Henry that was there. And I'm not sure if Green Bay PD dive team was there or not that day, but they did assist at some point.
And basically, it's your testimony then there were other agencies assisting in different ways in searches as well.
That's correct.
And ultimately, do you recall when you conducted that search on May 5th of 2013, did you recover Ms. Prokopovitz?
No, we did not.
Now, after that search, the following day, May 6th of 2013, did you have cause to engage in another search?
Yeah, I believe so. There were several searches throughout that timeline.
And the searches that you were conducting with respect to the investigation, were those all dive searches? Or I guess I should say searches with the Brown County Dive Team?
Well, the searches that I were involved in, yes. There were times when, based on the information, that if a couple of dive guys weren't busy, we would take a walk around the perimeter just to see if we could come up with any other evidence or anything like that. But our search was focused on the water. That's what the dive team's focus was. Yeah.
And you indicated that there were, and so with respect to the second dive then that you would have done, that was something, did you recover anything regarding Victoria Prokopovitz?
No, we did not.
Now I'm also looking at May 14th of 2013, so now a week later, there was another search with the Brown County Dive Team and the Green Bay Police Department Dive Unit. Were you a part of that search as well?
I believe so, yes.
And ultimately, with respect to that dive, was anything recovered with respect to the remains of Victoria Prokopovitz?
No, it was not.
Besides those searches back in May of 2013, do you believe that those were the only searches that you yourself were involved in with the Brown County Dive Team?
No, ma'am, there was another search.
Okay. And do you know when that was?
That would have been in the spring of 2018.
At that time, your dive unit, were you again contacted by Investigator Roman Ehrenstein with regard to conducting another search?
Yes, ma'am.
And as you're indicating, May of 2018, was that May 1st of 2018?
Yeah, I believe he contacted me sometime in the winter months, and yes, that would have been May that we eventually got to doing the search in that area.
Was that related to a tip that had come in February of 2018?
That's correct.
So you would have been, I get it, you were contacted in February. Is it a bit colder then than May date?
Yeah. Yes.
So as a result, back in the February timeframe of 2018, was it feasible for you to do a dive at that time?
It's feasible to go under the ice and do a dive, but we wouldn't do that on a search type dive.
Okay. So you're indicating then that although the information came forward in February, it was May 1st, 2018, that a search was going to be conducted of an area?
That's correct.
And was this a retention fishing pond?
Yes, ma'am.
You remember where that was?
It was in Pulaski, right behind the, I don't have the address, but right behind the county shops. It was a retention fishing pond area. Also, I think there was a water treatment area there, and a couple of smaller marshy areas right in that same area, around some trails and recreational type stuff.
And that's a pond off of Highway 32, is that right?
That's correct.
It's located in Brown County, Wisconsin.
Yes.
Now, at the time that you're conducting the search of this pond in Pulaski, do you recall then when verbiage of search zeroed approximately 50 feet out from shore, what does that mean?
That means that the search area was from the shoreline out to about 50 feet out. We were using a tethered and tendered system in which it was a way to do a complete and thorough search while tendered. As you can imagine, when you're underwater, you lose your ability for sense and positioning. So it's easier when you're tethered, and you can get a more thorough search, kind of like a half moon shape, if you will, back and forth.
Now, based on the training and experience and education that you'd have in this area involving dives, I'm presuming you've had training with respect to somebody who would be drowning, is that right?
Yes.
With regard to that, based on your training and experience, somebody that would drown in an area and maybe even initially sink, would they not rise to the surface?
Typically they would, unless they were weighted down.
So if you're weighted down with something, then possibly you could be put in a body of water and not be recovered or come to the surface?
Correct.
But if somebody had hypothetically voluntarily gone into water, based on your training and experience and knowledge, they would float to the top if they're not weighted down.
Absolutely, and that depends on density and body mass and a lot of different things, temperature of the water, a lot of different factors, but typically 3 to 4 days a human body will come back to the surface. Typically, I'm not an expert in it, but that's my training and experience would tell me that.
But for somebody either being weighted down, if they did that themselves or if somebody did it to them, they would be coming up to the surface.
Eventually, yes.
Thank you. Now, at the time that you're doing this search, you're just relating visibility. What do you do with respect to when your visibility is compromised?
Well, most of the waters around the Green Bay, Brown County area are pretty mucky, so a lot of times we use just visual searches, which takes a little bit more time, a little bit, you have to be a little more patient because, move a little bit slower because you're using your hands and your feet and everything else to find objects, because visibility, you may not have it.
So when you've referred to the fact that these dive teams that were utilized from the various police departments assist in the searches, you also made a reference to a sonar, is that right?
That's correct.
In a sonar search, that would be a mechanical search underwater, separate from what you're doing in a manual way.
Correct.
And other than this May search, that was the last search you had assisted with this investigation?
In 2018?
Yes.
Yes.
And on that date, on May 1st of 2018, did you recover any evidence of Victoria Prokopovitz or her remains?
No, ma'am.
I have nothing further.
Thank you very much. Mr. D'Angelo, anything?
Thank you. Now, Mr. Schermitzler, you told a little bit about your training. I just want to get a little bit more qualification. So, your 26 years of experience, you were also a SWAT member, so there's specialized training in that as well, correct?
That's correct.
And how long does it take to become a SWAT member? Like, how much training do you need?
That was a long time ago, but you have to go through a certain class in order to use special weapons and tactics, and then once you're done with the training, you also need to spend some time on the perimeter, if you will, to learn how it really is supposed to go. Yeah.
So this isn't a class you can learn in a week. This is months at a time, right?
Correct.
Okay. When you decided to go in and become part of the dive team, I'm assuming that this training that you received, you said it started with Homeland Security back in 2005. I'm assuming this wasn't something that if you knew how to dive, like if you went to resort to dive, you weren't going to be qualified. You have to go through hours of training as well?
Yeah, no, you needed a lot more training, yes.
Okay. Can you kind of describe, like, was there a time frame that it took you to become certified? Because you also indicated that you became a master diver, correct?
Dive master, it's
Oh,
different,
sorry,
yeah.
dive master.
Yeah,
My apologies.
different.
What does it take to become that qualified? I mean, how long does it take to do that?
You know, each certification as you go up from open water diver to advanced diver to dive master, all these different things takes a certain period of time. Takes a lot more log dives, a lot more experience. It depends on the person on how long it wants and how often they can get in the water is going to depend on how long a certain class is going to take in order to get a certain certification. But to get to my level, it certainly took a decade.
Okay, so 10 years to become to the level that you were. When you were doing this dives for the Brown County Rescue Search for Ms. Prokopovitz, what level were you at that point?
I believe I was around the dive master certification.
So pretty advanced at that point, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Were there other dive masters on the Brown County dive team?
I know we had one other dive master for sure, and I'm not sure if they were on the dive team at that point or if he was just giving it up because
So needless to say, the training is pretty extensive. It takes years to get to the level that you got to.
That's correct.
Okay. So you would say that you're pretty proficient when you did your excuse me, getting a little mumbled up here. Let's start that question over. You would, because of the level that you were at, when you were doing these dives, you were pretty proficient about doing the searches because in order to get to that level, you had to qualify to say that you were at that dive level, correct?
I would say so, yeah, plus the conditions, yes. Yeah.
And you would indicate that when you went on the first couple of searches, you guys explored every inch of the body of water that you were looking at, correct?
No,
Not every inch?
no.
Would you say that you explored only areas where you would suspect that there may be a body?
That's correct.
Okay, so there's certain parts of body of water that you can say, well, we're not going to have to check there because there's just no way a body would be there?
I think accessibility had a big play into where we searched and why we searched it. You got to remember, and I'm just guessing, I think this quarry is probably 20 to 30 acres. It was a very large quarry. Much of it was deep and obstructed with debris and other things. But you look at accessibility in areas where somebody could either walk in themselves or be thrown in. I think we limited to mostly the south and east side.
And when you looked through these areas, did you find anything, like how long did it take you to search the quarries? Let's start with the first search. How long do you think you were out there diving?
You know, like in the water dive time, or, I mean, we were out there pretty much the entire day, if I'm not mistaken, but these conditions were very difficult. It's basically in a quarry. Thermocline is at about 17 feet, so the top water may be at like 70 degrees, but once you get 17 feet down, it's an ice dive. It is 44 degrees, and it's cold, and when you're down 60, 80 feet, your downtime is going to be very limited. Plus, with the thermocline and just the conditions of the quarry, you have very little light. So to do a meticulous search, we had to spend more time down there, but it was rather slow moving. I can't give you an idea about exactly how much time we spent searching that day.
So just based on the level, you said the thermals, so the lower you go, it gets so much colder that your body has to come back up just to warm up and then be able to go down again. And oxygen levels is also an issue, right? The colder it gets, the oxygen compresses, you have less to take down with you.
The deeper you get, the more you compress, yes. But the cold, I mean, we could probably be down 20 minutes to a half hour if it was just the cold, but it's also the pressures and the other conditions that you're dealing with at the time. Plus, you have to do a safety stop when you're down, 60, 70, 80 feet, and that takes time as well. You want to watch your air.
Safety stop, that means as you're coming up, you have to get to a certain level to let your body acclimate so you don't go up so fast that your body somewhat rejects itself in a sense.
Correct.
Okay. And so on that first dive, you went through the quarries. Was it only one quarry that you looked at on that day?
In May of 2013?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. And then there was a second dive that you went in May of 2013. I think you said May 6th. Is that correct? Mm-hmm. What body of water were you checking then?
That was the same quarry.
Okay, so there's 2 days looking in the same quarry.
Correct.
Okay. And basically the same thing. You spent about a day on this. On May 6th, you spent another full day kind of prepping and then doing the dives because of the weather or the water conditions.
Yes, and I would say we did a perimeter search in the first 20 feet off the edge, very meticulous, and then one of the days we did more of a targeted search based on sonar and any other readings that came up as unusual bottom features, and then the swimmer would go directly to that, the diver would go directly to it.
So the sonar, is that controlled by the dive team, or is that controlled by somebody who's not actually diving?
By the person controlling the sonar, whether it's sector scan or side scan, is operating out of a boat or out of off the shore.
Okay. And when you're operating with the dive team and with somebody on sonar, is that approximately 6 to... I'm sorry, let me slow down again. With the dive team and sonar, approximately how many officers were out there at one time?
As many divers as we can get, probably 10, and some of them came from the Green Bay dive team. So I mean, we also had other people assisting us, like I mentioned, from Sturgeon Bay dive team and the DNR, that sort of thing. They did some ground operations that assisted us.
You also mentioned that there was a third dive, correct?
There. At the quarry, or?
That's what I was going to ask you. Was the third dive at the quarry, or was it somewhere else?
Well, the third one we discussed here was at the Poke-Days, behind the Poke-Days retention fishing pond.
Okay, so that's the retention pond one.
Yes.
Okay. And do you approximately know how many members were out there that day?
I think it was 5. Just an estimate. I remember it.
And now that this was May again, was the water in that retention pond, was it like the water in the quarry, which you had to deal with the climate differences as you go down?
No, it was much warmer and much shallower.
And did you guys search the entire retention pond?
Based on our a research, and when I went out there the month prior to get a better idea on what was the feasibility and accessibility and that sort of thing, I did that with Roman Ernstine. Most of that retention pond wouldn't have been feasible to conceal a body by any means because of the shallow waters on the would have been the west side. So we did just the portions that you could probably conceal a body. A little bit deeper, probably anywhere from 4 to 10 feet. And you know, there was decent visibility in there, so we were confident that in that area we were pretty certain that there wasn't a body concealed in that area.
And when you were doing all these different dives, did you find anything that would, not necessarily a body, but anything that would weigh down a body of any evidential value?
No.
And just to be understood, with all these men out there and dive members, nobody found anything of evidential value that was reported back to the detective area team, correct?
No.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Any redirect?
Just a couple, Your Honor. We're just asking some questions by the defense about some accessibility. And you keep using that word when you're describing these searches. And what do you mean by that overall? Why is that important with respect to these searches?
Yeah, accessibility, I mean, I'm talking about where a person could either freely walk in or somebody could throw somebody in, if you will, without obstruction, without difficulty. I guess that's what I mean by accessibility. I mean, if you, someplace where it's feasible to get a body in the water, one way or the other.
And when you were just asked by the defense some information about your search, on the May 1st of 2018 search, your report had indicated that there were 6 separate bodies of water in the area, right?
That's correct.
When you're talking about accessibility in your op plan, are you evaluating which of them is most likely makes sense that you would search?
That's exactly what we're doing, yes.
Okay. And with regard to that, 2 of the ponds were monitored and were not searched, is that right?
Correct.
Then what about the other 4 ponds?
Well, the one pond was a retention fishing pond, which we searched. Okay. And then there were 3 ponds that were off of Highway 32 that were used by a pickle factory years ago when they were kind of abandoned. Now, out of those 3 retention ponds, 2 of them were more of just muck. I don't think anybody would have been able to get concealed body by any means without being visible from the surface. And then the 3rd one we found was deep enough and accessible enough that was potential enough for us to search it. And so we searched just those 2 bodies of water, the retention fishing pond and the westernmost marsh off of Highway 32.
And so accessibility was an important factor with respect to evaluating whether you could find a body?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Anything else, Mr. D'Angelo?
No.
Thank you. You are excused then. Thank you very much. Your next witness then, please.
At this time, Your Honor, the state would call Sherri Jo Lucas to the stand.
Will you please remain standing and raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
You may be seated. record and spell both your first and last name for the court?
Sherri Joe Lucas, Sherri Lucas, Lucas.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Ms. Lucas.
Good afternoon.
Are you part or affiliated with the Rapid Search and Rescue Team?
Yes, I am.
And could you explain for the jury what is that?
Rapid Search and Rescue Team is a group of certified volunteers that have been trained, and they go out to locate lost or missing people, or children or adults.
And do you know how many members you have of that in that organization?
I'd say approximately 15, sometimes 10, it varies.
Okay. And so the goal or mission of that organization is to assist in locating a missing person?
Yes,
And when you're saying certified, is there a formal certification process that people undergo when they're assisting in this?
yes, there is, through NASAR, National Association of Search and Rescue.
Okay. And the acronym is NASAR?
Right,
National Association for Search and Rescue?
yes,
And so this is actually, these would be teams then that, there are organizations across the country?
yes,
And you work in conjunction with other groups that have the similar mission or goal to assist in locating missing people?
yes, we have it's a collective group, it's called STOW, S-T-O-W, Search Teams of Wisconsin. And it's canine mounted and boots on the ground teams that work collectively together, especially if there's a larger case, they will need a lot of different, the mounted and the horses, the boots on the ground and the canines.
And as you indicated, now, when you have the group that you're in, Rapid Search and Rescue, are there other, is it STOW teams in Wisconsin?
Yes.
And what are some of the other teams?
There's Headwaters Canine, which is located out of Milwaukee and Neenah. There is Valley Mounted Volunteers, which is out of Appleton, Wisconsin. There's Canine SOS, which is out of Madison, Wisconsin. There's Kurt Canine, which is Canine Emergency Response Teams, which is out of Neenah, Wisconsin. And then there's Nicolay out of Mountain, Wisconsin.
When you're talking about these various search teams, I identified as you were listing them, some of them are canine teams?
Yes,
And some of them are horseback?
yes.
Are there some that are simply volunteers or certified volunteers on foot?
Yes, Rapid Search and Rescue is a boots on the ground team.
Boots on the ground, that's what your organization is?
Yes.
Okay. And so besides boots on the ground, canines, horseback, are there other types of teams, or is that kind of?
That's pretty much what it is.
And the Rapid Search and Rescue team that you're a part of, how long have you been a part of that?
We actually formed in 2012.
Okay. And
But
you've
we've been
been,
working with law enforcement before that.
so you kind of formalized in 2012?
Yes,
And since that was instituted, have you always been a part of it?
yes.
Now, with regard to your role with Rapid Search and Rescue, are there different roles that people play when you go out on a search? Is somebody in charge? Is somebody a searcher? How does that work?
Well, you have an incident commander. They're the person that takes charge, and they organize all the teams collectively.
Okay.
You have a planning officer who writes the plans and does the missions. Generally, if you have a time that they can work, they get all their maps out, they do an interview with the family of the lost person, and they put all their information together to devise a plan that will work. You have an operations officer that they are there to put the plan into action, and they will brief a team before they go out and debrief a team when they come back so they can get more information for the planning officer. You have a communications officer on scene. They're working the radios, doing the status checks and getting the clues that come in, that type thing. And then you have a logistics officer that is locating the place that you're going to stage.
Sounding like a pretty organized enterprise.
It is.
With respect to the role that you have and your organization, how does your organization become involved in assisting somebody?
We only go out if law enforcement calls us. If a person, a regular citizen were to call us, we don't go out for that. It has to be through law enforcement.
Okay, so if somebody has somebody that is missing and they need some assistance and they're working with law enforcement, then your agency is contacted to assist in the searches?
Yes.
Okay. Now, specifically with regard to your role in rapid search and rescue, at some point did you become involved or make contact with the efforts in locating Victoria Prokopovitz?
Yes, we did.
And do you remember who contacted your organization?
The first contact would have been Roman, a detective, Roman Ehrenstein. He contacted Andy Elmer Anderson, who contacted us.
Okay. And so then now that's how your organization becomes involved to assist.
Yes.
And as a result of that, were you involved in a search that occurred on June 1st of 2013?
Yes, we were.
And do you recall where that search occurred?
We were staging at the Plainfield Town Hall.
And when you say staging, what does that mean?
That means we went there the day before and set up the radios, the antennas, everything, and all the mapping was laid out that we could stage there, and then everyone would meet there and we'd send the missions out.
All right.
Pardon me? And then we would send the missions out.
And did you say send the missions out?
Yes.
What does that mean?
Well, the planning officer will write all different missions, and they'll try to have them written, at least some, before we arrive, so the minute we get there, they can start sending the missions out. And it will be canine missions, mounted missions, boots on the ground missions. Each one has a team leader.
So kind of a mission might be also referenced like a goal
Yes, or a task.
or task. Okay.
Yes.
Now, with regard to this search on June 1st of 2013, do you recall what your role was with regard to that?
I was the incident commander.
And when you're the incident commander, what were you doing on that date?
I needed to put the team together, and then the team would implement the plan. When a clue came in, I was the determining person. What do we do with the clue? You just oversee the mission as it's going on.
So you're there when you're staging the day before?
Yes,
And you're there determining what the tasks are going to be or the missions for the searchers?
I'm there to see that the missions are implemented, and then it can be changed as clues would come in, or as a team goes out, they may see something that needs to be also addressed, and then we would change a plan a little bit to incorporate that.
So you're in charge on that search?
Yes.
On this date, when, and now again, I'm talking about the June 1st, 2013 date. So when you're talking about staging, that would have been the day before May 31st of 2013.
Yes.
Right. The June 1st date appears that it was a Saturday. Does that sound right?
Yes.
And do you recall what the hours were that your team was out there?
I believe, without looking at my report, I believe it was 8 o'clock in the morning till 5:30 in the evening, I believe.
And okay, that's correct. Do you remember on the scene the number of teams that were there?
We had 4 or 5 teams, and I believe we had 47 actual personnel there.
I guess when you already referred to your report, with regard to your role at Rapid Search and Rescue, when you're in charge of this kind of mission, are you the person who memorializes what happens in a detailed report?
Yes, but my planning officer will put everything that she used to come to her conclusions. The operations officer, planning officer, they will all, and then all the canine teams will all also add, and that all, I put it all together and make the report.
You mean like a final report?
Yes.
Would looking at your final report in this case or summary assist you just with accuracy on some of the questions that you're asked here now today?
Pardon me?
Would looking at that report while you're testifying assist you with the accuracy of knowing?
Yes.
Okay. I'm showing you what's been marked as exhibit number 56. Does
Yes.
this appear to be a copy of the report you just referred to?
Yes, it is.
Okay. And with regard to this report, as I'm opening it to page 2, I just asked you a question about the number of the teams on scene. Does it indicate in the report how many there were?
Yes, it does.
How many were there?
It says there were 4.
And with regard to the report that you utilize and you detail what happened in the search, as part of that, do you also document the number of personnel on the scene?
Yes, we do.
And what was that on that date?
43.
Now, what does that mean, the number of personnel? Is that your team, is that other team, what is that?
That's the combined, all the teams together, the people that were there searching.
Okay. And the total volunteer man hours, is that also on the report?
Yes, it is.
How many was that?
417.5.
Now, when you're referring to so 417 hours?
Yes,
Okay. When you are referring to the 4 teams that you just testified to, I'm presuming one is the Rapid Search and Rescue.
yes.
What were the other teams there on that date?
Valley Mounted Volunteers, that is a mounted unit. Headwaters Search and Rescue, that is a canine team. And Kurt Canine, a canine team.
So that looks to me one group on horseback and 2 canines, is that right?
And 1 boots on the ground, yes.
And of course, you're the boots on the ground,
Right.
all right. Now, with respect to that, does it also detail how many missions were completed during this op?
Yes, I believe it does. I just have to locate that. A total of 19 missions.
Okay. And of those missions, does it detail what those missions were?
Yes.
What were they?
9 were canine teams, 4 were horse-mounted teams, 5 were boots on the ground, and 1 mission was a boat with sonar and canine at the quarry.
Okay. And so the quarry actually then was also searched by the canine, is that right?
Yes,
And there was also a sonar used of the quarry?
yes.
Do you recall if there were any canine alerts on the quarry on that date?
That I would have to look at the canine report for. Yes, there was.
Now, I'm sorry, yes, there was an alert?
Yes.
Okay. And what does that detail?
Well, first of all, I'm not a canine person.
Okay.
So, you know, you're asking me to explain something that they are better off explaining. But in their summary, they just said that there was a high level of interest in the quarry and was very actively looking for a scent. The conditions were less than ideal because it was wet outside, it was raining. She showed behaviors at times consistent with scent in the water. However, she never gave her final trained response to scent or showed a consistent high level of interest to any one specific area.
Okay. Now, with respect to, and that was at the quarry, right?
Yes.
Now, with respect to the other areas that were searched on that date, was there a map that actually was drafted to kind of indicate where some of those searches occurred?
Yes.
And when there are canines that are utilized and horseback, is there a tracking system that's utilized by these organizations to document where people go?
Yes, each team, the team leader has a GPS and a police radio. The GPS, when they go out on their mission, they're given a paper copy of their mission and their GPS is zeroed. When they come back from their mission, they're debriefed. They tell us anything they've seen or noticed that we need to know about, and their GPS is plugged into a mapping system, and it shows exactly detailed where they walked.
So what about boots on the ground? You also have a GPS on you?
Right, every team, whether you're mounted, boots on the ground, or canine, you have a GPS unit, and your track is kept.
Is that every single, like, boots on the ground person would have?
No, the team leader.
Team leader, okay. And the team leader, I'm presuming then, is searching with the other members?
Yes. Each team has a team leader.
So that's essentially the way that you're tracking through the team leader and wherever the path or track is that they're searching on that date?
Yes.
Now, I just alluded to the fact, first of all, the report that you would have prepared on this mission, the overall report, that is something that details what Rapid Rescue did, what the other 3 teams did, and essentially what the findings were on that date?
Yes.
With respect to that GPS system, what is the advantage with respect to that? What's the importance of that?
Well, we can tell exactly what area we covered. We're not just walking in the woods blind. When you come back and your GPS is plugged into the mapping system, our planning officer is actually looking at a map, keeping exact track of where everyone went. And sometimes the plans can get switched as you're working your mission because you're looking and they can see where they need to cover, where maybe they veered off and where they went and where they need to go back, and then we'll send them back to cover that area.
So something like that GPS assist you with accuracy?
Yes, much so.
At this time, Your Honor, the state, and in this case, you were the person, I think you already did testify, that prepared the overall summary of this
Yes.
Pittsfield search mission? Your Honor, at this time, we move for the admission, does it say 56?
Yes.
We move for the admission of 56. This was a report that was prepared by the witness. We are asking to publish it just so we could put it up on the board, assist the jury.
Any opposition to me receiving it?
No objection, Your Honor.
Any opposition to publishing the document?
No objection, Your Honor.
All right, go ahead then, Ms. Lemko. I will receive it and you can publish it.
So, Your Honor, for purposes of the publishing, We are specifically going to just publish, and this is, again, for edification of recording purposes for all public, we are going to be first publishing page 4 of the document. We're not publishing all of it.
All right, Mr. DeAngelo, do you understand that?
Yes, Your Honor, no objection.
Okay, then we'll do that.
Now, would looking at this document assist you in your testimony here today?
Yes.
Thank you. So if you could proceed also to the 4th page of the document, your summary report that you have. As we're looking at this map, the resident in question on that Coonish Road address, is that in the center of this map? Or where would it be?
It is not marked on here. It should be on the center, I believe.
Okay, and if you're looking at exhibit number 1 behind you,
Okay.
does that appear to be consistent and similar to the area that is on your map?
Yes.
Okay. And so with the yellow house that's on there, that would be consistent with the center of the map, is that right?
Yes.
Now, could you describe for the jury, it appears this is color-coded. What is pink?
The pink was what had been covered previously before June 1st.
Okay. That you were aware of.
Yes.
And then what is the blue?
That would be the horses, the mounted units.
Okay. And then what is the yellow?
That is the canine teams.
And what is the green?
The green is the ground, boots on the ground.
So this is somewhat, is this somewhat a shaded area of some of what was searched then on that date?
Yes.
And now we're going to proceed to page 10, which is the grid with the circle in the center. We're also, Your Honor, this would be the 2nd document we're publishing.
Any objection at all, Mr. DeAngelo?
No objection.
Oh, go ahead then.
Did you have a chance to get to that page?
Yes.
What is that?
That is to show our operation that day was to search up to 2.5 miles out from the last place seen.
Why is that?
That is because there is a book that is lost person behavior, and that is what all search and rescue teams use. It has been categorized through searches, thousands and thousands and thousands of searches, and it tells us, we pick a category, in this case it was despondent, we picked a category, and it tells us where to look. And so we start and we work our way out to the 2.5 miles, and that's the area we wanted to cover.
And you're doing this a little over a month from when Victoria Prokopovitz went missing?
Yes.
And at that time, her family that you've been dealing with on the search, who's the family member?
Marcia.
And that's Marcia Loritz?
Yes.
And with regard to that information, at that time, were there concerns by Marcia and the family that they had concerns she could have been suicidal?
Yes.
So there's, or something happened to her, but either way, there's concern she's deceased.
Yes.
So at that time, when you are now making a determination of what area to search, the guide that you're talking about, is that something that guides you to what type of area you'd be searching for someone who's despondent?
Yes,
And is that also a word for potentially suicidal?
yes.
Now, when you're talking about that area, is there a certain percentage that is offered with reliability as to how far somebody would have gotten?
There is, you start at the last place seen, and then you work your way out, which we did. Can I refer back to the first page?
Sure.
We started in the center and we worked, it was 25% we worked out from the last place seen. And it ended up, the last day we were there, that we did 40% was out to the 2.5 miles out from the home. If that, it's hard to explain that in layman terms from how we decipher it.
Sure. And so the circle that you have drafted on this map, the center of the circle would have been where Victoria was last seen?
Yes,
And the search area that you then searched, is it your testimony here today, you would have searched that entire did you say 2.5 mile area?
yes,
And based upon your training and experience and the use of all 4 of these teams, that area had been searched on that date?
on that date and the
Previous
weekend, right, the previous date.
Okay, that's right, because this wasn't the only time these groups were going out, is that right?
Right.
And on that date, when all of these teams are searching that area, did anybody find Victoria Prokopovitz or her remains?
No, we did not.
Based upon the search that you did, on that date, were you also involved on other dates for searches?
Yes,
And with regard to the other searches that were conducted, do you know how many other ones you were involved in?
four, I believe.
Okay. And so you had searched on the June 1st of 2013, is that right?
Yes,
And then there was a search on June 7th of 2013,
yes,
June 16th of 2013,
yes,
and June 22nd of 2013, isn't that right?
yes,
Based upon participating in all of those searches, and I'm presuming all of those searches were done in a similar manner?
Some of the missions later on after the June 1st mission were, I'd call it a cleanup mission. They were where we needed to send, after putting everything together, a canine team needed to go out and finish and check a certain area. And so then we would send the canine team out to take care of that.
And so like the June 22nd, 2013, there were 2 canines of a quarry and a pit, is that right?
Yes,
And then on the June 16th date, there was also 3 canine teams as well, is that right?
yes,
Now, based upon your training and experience and the 4 searches that you were involved in, this would begin on May 1st of 2013, extending through the final one you were involved in, June 22nd, 2013. Were there any other areas that could have been searched where you could have reasonably believed to have found Victoria Prokopovitz?
no,
At that time, the searches that were conducted based upon the certifications that you were familiar with as the other teams were, did you believe that they were extremely thorough?
yes,
Is there anything else you could have searched?
no.
I have nothing further.
Thank you, Mr. Mandel.
Thank you. Now, ma'am, when it talks about these different search teams, you talked about certification. How long does it take to be certified to become a search member through, is it NASAR, the National Association of Search and Rescue?
You have to spend 2 weekends of training. You then are taken up to the Shawanagan National Forest. You have to set up a complete search mission. You have to play every position, so every team member would know how to be incident commander, would know how to do planning, would know. And there's a lot of other things that go with that, learning the GPS, learning everything. And then you have to take a test and certify.
Okay. So it's not just something where you can learn it in a few-hour session. You have to go through some specific training, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you mentioned 43 people. Did all 43 people go through that specific training?
Yes.
Okay. You also mentioned canine teams. Do the canines themselves, are they specialized canines that have been trained to search for lost individuals or whatever?
There's different types of dogs. There's the human remains, the scent, and the tracking. They all have specific training to their certifications.
And the dogs that are out there for these searches, were they both for human remains and alive individuals?
We had tracking dogs, or scent tracking dogs, in case we could find her. And we did have HR dogs, human remain dogs.
Okay. And you mentioned that you were not a canine team, but you've dealt with canine teams. Do you know approximately how long does a person's scent last that a canine would actually find?
I can't answer you and beyond. I wouldn't know.
Okay. And you wouldn't know that for the human remain dogs either, correct?
No.
With regards to the mountain horses, are these just to give people more distance to search, or are these horses also trained to track scents or anything? Do you know?
Well, they're not centered. They're certified and they're trained. We use them to cover fields and the borders along the woods, because in our planning stages, if she was despondent and if she had went out there, she probably would have walked along a woods or on a trail or on a road. So we concentrated on that in the beginning.
Okay. So you concentrated around, and I think you said about a 2.5 mile radius around the home, correct?
Yes.
Somebody got a ride somewhere else, and that would have not necessarily been able to be tracked, true?
True.
Okay. Now, when you're looking for, when you said you typically meet with individuals to get some background information about the missing person, are the dogs given a specific scent to smell for? Like, are they given a piece of clothing items? Like, maybe I watch too much TV, but they always, it looks like they give the dog a scent and then they let him go, but that's not exactly how it works?
I cannot answer you that in this case because I was not on the scene to see what happened. I've seen that done.
Okay. You haven't seen it done, but you don't know if it was done in this particular case?
I was not on the scene watching the dogs at the time that was done.
If I heard you correctly, did I hear you say 417 and a half man-hours just on one search?
Yes.
Would you say that that was about the average number on all the other searches as well? Or
No.
that was a little bit less because you said there were some cleanup searches?
Right. There was one other large-scale search, which was May 12th, I believe it was, and that was a lot of manpower. And then the other ones were mainly cleanups with the dogs, sending them where we thought this area had been done good enough, we needed to go back.
And you mentioned that you work with, you usually only get involved if you're requested by the police department, correct?
Right.
When you do the searches, are the police department, are there personnel from the police department with their own search equipment out there as well? Or is it strictly
Are you talking this specific search?
Well, let's talk about the first search. Was there police involvement in the first search?
They were there at the staging area. And then anytime we have a question, something arises that we need to discuss with them, we'll have a number and we'll call them and they'll come right back and we'll work over whatever the situation was.
Okay, so the police are really there to, if there's a clue and somebody hits their signal and says, hey, we think we've seen something, you send the officers out there, they verify, but the officers aren't the ones that necessarily actively searching at that moment.
Not at these searches.
Okay. And that's with all the searches you were involved with? Typically, the officers are kind of
For
like
this
overseers?
case, yes.
Okay.
But I do want to state this, there were other canine teams there, so I don't know what went on at those searches.
I'm just more talking about the canine units that you were
Okay,
kind of
okay.
involved with. Those are all, I guess, civilian, because they weren't police officers, but they're more civilian certified rescue or search and rescue individuals, right?
Yes.
And you mentioned there was a hit at the quarry with the canine team, but there was no final response. Do you know if that area was searched more thoroughly by people on the ground?
The ground people, the boots on the ground would have been there, yes. If a dog alerts anywhere, another dog is sent in.
Okay.
Everything's got to be verified.
Do you know when this dog, someone alerted but didn't get the final one, did they send another dog in there anyways just to verify what the alert may have been?
We do.
Okay.
I don't know what other canine groups do.
Now, on that alert, was there anything of evidentiary found, or do you know what that alert really was?
That particular one turned out it was nothing.
Okay. It was just the dog had a little bit of an alert, but nothing that indicated it was a human body or anything of that nature?
Correct.
Okay. Anything else of significance found on any of these searches?
Things that weren't significant we found and they were verified and checked out, but nothing significant, no.
Okay, so nothing that would relate back to Victoria Prokopovitz being missing?
No.
Were you only in contact with the police, or were you in contact with any of the Prokopovitz family members?
We were in contact with Marcia. We did an interview with her. We needed to get the facts of her mother. That's all part of your planning that goes into it.
And when you say cleanup missions, I just want to clarify that. So that's just when you said you sent out other dog units to go in areas that maybe they didn't hit on the GPS that you wanted them to hit?
What I'm saying is if we look back at all the missions we did, as you know, when a person walks through the woods, they could veer off. If there was any section that wasn't covered, we would send back to clean it up because it had to all be covered.
No any further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Lemko, do you have anything else?
When you were asked about, just by the defense, when you're just asked by the defense about the contact you had with the family members, you said that your main contact was Marcia Loritz, is that
Yes.
right? Did she, based upon all of your interactions, appear to be the family member that was organizing the search from the family's perspective?
Absolutely.
Now, you've been out on other searches. Is it typical that you'll deal with the family members at some point, even just for purposes of your op plan and determining what you're searching?
You deal with a lot of family members and they're usually pretty anxious.
The behavior that you saw with respect to this case, did Marcia appear to be pretty anxious?
Oh, yeah.
Did you have any interaction with Jim Popovic?
No, we tried, but at one, I believe it was the May search, the family was after him to come over there because we wanted to talk to him. And finally, he came and he made an appearance in the parking lot, and then we tried to coax him in because, you know, we needed information, wanted information. And finally, we coaxed him in, but then he walked out and left right away. So that was the only contact we had at all.
So the behavior based upon the other searches you've been on and your interactions with other family members in a typical missing person case, was his behavior different?
Absolutely.
I have nothing further.
Okay, Mr. D'Angelo, you have anything?
Ma'am, just a follow-up on that question. Did you have any interaction with Jim Popovic before that day?
No,
Have you ever met with him or know what his personality is like?
no,
Do you know if he's more of a quiet or private person?
no.
So when you say that his behavior was different, you don't really know if that behavior is any different than what Jim normally is on a daily basis?
I do a lot of searches, and we deal with a lot of families, and the family members are there, and there's a difference. They need answers. They're anxious. They're questioning you. We had to fight to get him there.
How many searches do you deal with when there's people that are suicidal?
A lot.
And dealing with people with mental health issues, do certain family members react differently than others? When it comes to a family member that has a person goes missing who has mental health issues?
Yes, they do, but I've never seen family members that don't need answers.
But at this particular case, you didn't really ever speak with Jim or get any of his thoughts about what was going on, correct?
No.
No further questions.
Okay, thank you. You're excused. Thank you very much. You're free to go. Can you put me on mute a minute? Ms. Lemko and Mr. DeAngelo, if you'd come up here for a moment. We're going to give you an afternoon break. If you would go with Bailiff Tom, I would appreciate that. Thank you. Stand for the jury, please. And this will be 15 minutes long. Thank you, and we will see everybody about 3 o'clock.